How worried should Americans, should the world be by a Donald Trump presidency? Is it the unique, historic game changer that a lot of politicians and pundits seem to think it is? And how did Trump end up winning against the odds? Joining me to discuss this are Naomi Wolf, best-selling author, a former advisor to Bill Clinton and Al Gore, and the CEO of the Daily Clout, Bob Hormats, vice chairman of Kissinger Associates, who served under Hillary Clinton as Undersecretary of State, and before that was a vice chairman of Goldman Sachs. Hamid Dabashi, professor of Iranian Studies and Comparative Literature at Columbia University and the acclaimed author of more than 20 books, and David K. Johnston, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, author of The Making of Donald Trump, and a man who's known the new president-elect for almost 30 years. Thanks all for joining me on UpFront. David K. Johnston, I'll start with you, since you're the man who's on, I won't say friendly terms, but personal terms with the president-elect. How big a shock was this result for you? How big a deal is Donald Trump winning the presidency?
Well, I always said he might win. And in fact, the fact is that he has, and he is going to be the president, and hopefully we're going to have peaceful transition. I don't think this is going to go well for the country, and I hope that this turns into lemonade instead of lemons for America, and people recognize how important it is to pay as much attention to politics as many people do to the last scrimmage in a football game.
Naomi Wolf, what was your reaction when you saw the results late on Tuesday night?
I mean, I wish I could say that I was surprised. I'm extremely troubled and frightened as an American, as someone who cares about democracy, and especially as someone who's been warning since 2009 that we've seen every signs progressively of losing critical aspects of our democracy. One of the things as a journalist that I feel personally exposed about is that, you know, this is a guy who has made no secret of his antagonism to journalists, and we have something called Clause 1021 in a bill that was passed in 2012 that allows this guy to hold any American indefinitely without charge or trial. That was a theoretical concern when I was screaming and yelling about it in 2012, 2013. It is a real fear for me right now.
Yes, all those, executive powers that liberal Barack Obama amassed are now available to conservative populist Donald Trump. Hamid Dabashi, put this in some historical perspective for us. When you look at the assassination of JFK, the attack on Pearl Harbor, 9/11, where does this fit in kind of major traumatic American political events?
I just came from New York. I can tell you chapter and verse. Since 9/11, I had not seen New York so frightened. On Columbia campus, NYU campus, the city, public schools, etc. It has a historical perspective. I wouldn't go as far back as Pearl Harbor, but there is something in the history of the crescendo of the rising of the right in the United States that at least has to be traced back to Reaganomics, and after that the new conservative takeover, after that the rise of the Tea Party, and now with this prospect of fascism. That's the trajectory that needs to be kept in mind.
Bob Hormats, you served in the Obama administration, you served under Hillary Clinton, you're a Democrat. How much of a disaster is this for Americans who call themselves Democrats, liberals, progressives, who say they're on the left?
Well, it was certainly a shock, and certainly most people in the Democratic Party didn't anticipate anything like this, and particularly the kind of states in which he won, like Wisconsin and others. Most people thought they weren't in play at all, and Democrats would do very well. But it is shocking, and the real question before us now is, does he govern the way he ran for the presidency? Does he take the same kind of views as president that he did when he was running?
David K. Johnston, you've studied the man up close and personally for 28 years. Can he change?
No, Donald's a 70-year-old man. I'm 67. I'm not going to change, and neither is Donald. What you're seeing in this election is not the home of the free and the brave, but the rise of fear and authoritarianism. And I think we need to be very concerned about that. And Naomi's quite right. I'm not going to continue doing what I'm doing, but I recognize totally that Donald could have me swept off the streets once he becomes president and held incommunicado. It's important for people to remember two things. The privilege of habeas corpus in the Constitution is a privilege. It is not a right, and the president can suspend it in times of insurrection. So we should not have any violence whatsoever, no matter how much individual acts of violence are committed by racists and bigots. There should be no violence in response, because that will allow Trump to suspend habeas corpus. And I'm very concerned that he will, given the right opportunity, suspend the Constitution.
Okay, well, let me put this point to Hamid Dabashi, because a lot of people are warning about this. David's put it in a very eloquent and quite scary terms, I think most people would say. This idea that, you know, he could be an authoritarian president, he could abuse powers that exist, invent new powers, etc. And yet, when you hear all that, why is it then that so many people stayed at home? So many people saw that there was no difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. You were one of those who wrote that I see no difference between Clinton and Trump. They're just as bad as each other. In fact, you wrote Clinton is an infinitely more dangerous warmonger than all of the crackpot Republicans put together. Do you regret saying that?
No, I don't. Our legitimate criticism of Donald Trump should not be fed as regretting that Hillary Clinton is not. Hillary Clinton has her own warmongering, corporate connected, threatening nuclear annihilation of a whole country, etc., etc. Hillary Clinton was a known phenomenon, and Donald Trump is not a known phenomenon in terms of administration. One should not make this an ad hominem Donald Trump. Is the Congress, the Senate, and God forbid even the Supreme Court, it is a crescendo of institutions which are not under threat.
I want to put that point to Bob. Do you want to respond?
Well, first of all, I think to call Hillary Clinton a warmonger is ridiculous. I worked for her for 4 years. She's not a warmonger. And she's not comparing her with Donald Trump. She has a lot more experience. She has very good judgment on a wide range of issues. So I don't think that charge is accurate at all. I do think there are a lot of risks with Trump. First of all, I do think the point that he played to anger and fear is correct. He did. But he picked on a stream of thinking that has grown in the United States for the last several years. A lot of people feel disenfranchised. A lot of people feel that they have not benefited from prosperity, whereas Wall Street and a number of companies have. A lot of people feel that their problems are not being addressed in Washington. A lot of people feel that money really dominates the political process. Those are all legitimate concerns. The problem is, what are the answers? Do you appeal to anger, or do you try to find constructive answers to some of those concerns? I think Hillary aimed at that, and unfortunately, a lot of people's anger overcame the rational discourse that should have been in this campaign.
You know, there's a lot of talk about the left behind, neoliberalism, anti-establishment. I mean, if you look at Trump voters and the studies that have been done, they're not the poorest of the poor. And in fact, racial resentment is what a lot of experts say is driving them, a lot more than income inequality. Hillary actually won more voters, according to the exit poll, amongst the poorest segments of America than Donald Trump did.
Right, but
are we ignoring the very real issue about racism,
I
white insecurity, majority America?
You're mushing together respectfully class and race, and you're missing the nature of the grievance here in America. It is the middle class, and I've seen this in my own lifetime. You know, there used to be a middle class in America. There used to be people who could live together with the rich and the poor in cities because they could afford, you know, to be part of a community that was dense and urban. You know, there used to be a middle class that expected to send their kids to college, that expected their kids' lives to be better than their own lives. That's gone, and it's partly gone because of Mrs. Clinton and President Clinton. You know, again, respect them as politicians. NAFTA was the beginning of what these people felt, and they are not just feeling, but perceiving.
The studies show that the people who voted for Trump are not in
ground.
areas that were hurt by free trade, are not in areas that were hurt by immigration. They are people who are much more driven by a black president.
They're middle class.
By whether Obama is Muslim. These are the stuff that ties together.
I think that, you know,
that's what the studies are showing.
His voters may show those people motivated by racism, but I'm certain, and because I've spoken to them and listened to them, it shows people who feel deeply disenfranchised.
Okay, how much does race play a role in this versus economics, Hamid?
In my opinion,
a lot.
You cannot. Race and class are two important issues. They're both important. Let's remember the dialectic of having these two candidates was playing into who voted for whom. I am absolutely convinced if the Democratic National Convention had not manhandled Bernie Sanders' primary, as we know they did, and it was Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump, we would have had a much different outcome.
You think Bernie would have won?
Absolutely, I'm convinced.
David K. Johnston, what is he going to do? Is there a danger that a lot of these people are angry, as Naomi's pointed out, disillusioned, have legitimate grievances, you put it, they vote for Trump, and you get a guy who's not going to do anything for them, his tax plan helps the 1% more than it helps any of them. What does that mean for the United States going forward? Does that just kick the anger down the road?
Well, we are in complete uncharted waters here. we don't know at all what's going to happen because Donald Trump has no political philosophy. He's not a fascist. He's not a conservative. He is a self-glorifier who believes he is genetically superior, and he has said that in the public record as one of his sons. So we are totally in uncharted territory here. I think the biggest concern, and I think we will have a constitutional crisis over this, is that he has the psyche of a 13-year-old boy in a 70-year-old man's body. And when the pressures come upon him as president about things he can't talk about, you're going to see it come out in some way. That's what I'm worried about, is that he is not emotionally stable.
You served in the State Department, Bob. Looking around the world today, what is the reaction of foreign governments, allies of the United States, to President Trump in January? And if you're an ally of the United States, how do you deal with this guy? What do you do? Do you cut your ties with America? Do you pretend he's not there, he's not the president? What do you do?
Well, this is one of the things that worries me. It's a good question. I think I was very disturbed at the way he dealt with allies in general during the campaign. Japan, South Korea, will let them have nuclear weapons and defend themselves. The kind of negative views he expressed about NATO, Mexico, one of our major partners. He has got to realize that one of the reasons that the United States for years has been able to play, I think, a constructive and certainly a substantial international leadership role is that we had strong alliances. I think his first goal on the international side should be to sit down with our NATO allies, sit down with the Prime Minister of Japan, the President of Korea, and underscore the fact that we want to reinvigorate our alliances, not let them deteriorate as some of his policies that he's advocated would do in the campaign.
Hamid, Bob's talking about allies, talking about quote-unquote enemies of the United States. Iran is a country you know well. What's the reaction to a Donald Trump president? What happens to US-Iranian relations?
You have to put it, Mehdi, in the geopolitics of the region and the trouble spots. The trouble spots are Syria, where Iran is, where the Russia is, where the Turkey is, where the Saudis and the Qataris and everybody else is, and Iraq. Now, in Iraq, fortunately, ISIS is on the run. But where is ISIS is going to go? Probably to Central Asia, probably to North Africa. So it is not just a question of the unknown factor, and I do agree that Donald Trump's policies is unknown. We don't know which way he's going to go. But the fact of the very troubled region, all the way from Syria down to Yemen, how is he going to redefine his relationship with masses of billions of dollars of weapons sold to Saudi Arabia at the head of an 11-nation coalition bombing Yemen? If you go from North Africa to Yemen to Syria, there are really volatile situations.
And he wants to tear up the Iran nuclear deal, which is probably President Obama's biggest foreign affairs legacy.
And having lost its share of benefits in the aftermath of Libya, Russia has now entrenched itself in Syria with the alliance with Iran, and it is a very dangerous and volatile situation. And certainly he's not.
David K. Johnston, very briefly on Trump and Russia. You've written a great deal.
We do not know the full nature of the relationship between Donald Trump and Putin, but people should recognize that there are heavy financial relationships there, and more importantly, the way Donald Trump talks about Putin is the same way that mob soldiers who don't know they're being tape recorded by the FBI talk about the head of their mobs. So I suspect there is some deep relationship going on with the oligarchs and Trump that we don't know about. It may well trace to this violent felon, Felix Sater, who's very closely involved with Trump and his business dealings.
David K., thank you. Naomi, what do you think the world is thinking this week when they see Donald Trump is going to ascend to the office of JFK and Abraham Lincoln and FDR? He's going to be the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the history of the world.
Right. I mean, our brand was being tarnished, I think, in the last 15 years. But this is definitely a new, terrifying message for many people around the world. And 1 in 4 people on the planet is Muslim. And this is a candidate. I'm Jewish, and I've said online, yesterday, Muslims are the new Jews. Like, it feels like 1933 in America to me, in that this stream of overt, violent, racist rhetoric targeting a group of people who are our friends and neighbors, and who are our neighbors globally. 1 in 4 people on the planet, one of the Abrahamic religions, is being unleashed. So that's one crisis. I think that the issues about his isolationism are also obviously of concern. I do just want to say about that, though, that something that I really think has to stop, and Brexit is a reason it has to stop, and this election, is that elites like us here, we're talking about what America should do in the world as if half of America hasn't said they want a more isolationist position.
David K. Johnston has had to leave us. We're running out of time. Bob, there is this sense that Donald Trump, not just against Hillary Clinton, but against his fellow Republicans, against the Jeb Bushes and Marco Rubios of this world, he benefited, he played off that sense of, yes, Americans want to focus on what's happening in America. They're less interested in the debacles abroad. Libya turned out to be a debacle. Iraq turned out to be a debacle. There's no clear choice in Syria. And that resonated with a lot of Americans, didn't it?
Yes,
Failed
it
foreign
did.
policies.
And it certainly did. And we saw it in the ballot boxes all around the country. I think it is certainly true that with a large group of Americans who feel that they have been left behind, they haven't been listened to, their jobs are in jeopardy, their wages are being pushed down or at least not increasing, and a whole other set of grievances as well. Unless we're able to deal with that, we're not going to be able to have a robust foreign policy because we won't have domestic support for it.
I mean, respectfully, you're really dismissing what a lot of these people are saying. They're saying 3,000 American young men and women are dead with a war that was based on lies to the American people. That
Not dismissing it.
Wait, just wait, because they're talking about foreign policy. And 100,000 Iraqis are dead, and Boeing and Raytheon mint money from endless global war on terror that is never going to end. And people get that, and they're saying enough. We are not on board for that foreign policy. And that's not stupid, and I think that's something that, we all have to reckon with.
Donald Trump
I'm not dismissing it at all. I think Americans are concerned about just what you've said, wars in which people have lost lives, large numbers of lives, and of course.
Not just wars, bad wars, wars of choice based on lies.
Okay, let Bob respond. Let Bob respond as we're nearly out of time.
I take your point that most Americans feel that those wars have cost a lot of lives and a lot of money and are much more reluctant to get involved in international activities of a military nature anywhere in the world. Okay. I take that point totally.
We'll have to leave it there. That's our show. Up Front will be back next week.